Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We'll go ahead and give it another minute or so to let some folks finish coming into the meeting. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Becky Kemp. I'm the Senior Manager of Business Partnerships and Marketing over here at SDR Ventures. I'll be your host for today's session. We have 4 industry experts guiding us through today's topic. We have Brandon Rains, estate attorney with the Rains Law Firm. Joining us from First Western Trust are Beck Nygard and Andrew Jenkins. Beck and Andrew are seasoned professionals in wealth management and trust services. Last but certainly not least, we have Scott Mitchell, Managing Director at SDR Ventures. Scott's expertise lies in M&A, business advisory, and valuations. We'll go ahead and leave 10 minutes for some Q&A at the end of this presentation, so please submit your questions through the chat feature at any time. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in. Brandon, can you please go ahead and kick us off by providing some background into the TCJA and what we should expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So the TCJA stands for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was passed in 2017. And for our purposes today, really that conversation is all about estate tax planning. What the estate tax is all about is it says your net worth up to the estate tax exemption is tax-free, and then any of your net worth when you pass away that's above that exemption is taxed at 40% after you pass away. So really what happened was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act doubled that exemption back in 2017, and currently, since it's indexed to inflation, is $13.6 million per individual, $27.2 million per couple. Now, which is great, it's very high. That means that most of us don't need to worry about the estate taxes. Some of us still do, but for the most part, we don't. Now, the curveball has been always baked into this situation with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the doubling of the estate tax exemption is that it was always designed to sunset. This was a temporary doubling of the exemption. As of, December 31st, 2025, January 1st, 2026, that exemption is designed to go down in about half. Using today's numbers, that's $6.8 million per individual, $13.6 million per married couple, probably end up being in somewhere in that $7.5 million per individual, 14 to 15 per couple here in about a year and a half, something like that. So that's really what that looks like. And what that means is this decrease of exemption means that there's going to be an increase of individuals. It'll be easier to have an estate tax concern as of January 1st, 2026. Number one, and then number two, it means that we'll have less of an exemption to play around with to participate in perfectly legal tax strategies that can, even with the exemption going down, bring down our estate tax liability to zero or as close as zero as possible.
Awesome. Thanks for providing that. Scott, do you have any sort of comments as far as just how this kind of affects business owners and why we as an investment bank are talking about this?
Oh, you're muted, Scott.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, there are really 3 areas of preparation that are critical for business owners to optimize their business transition. The first is the most obvious, and that's preparing the business to be as valuable as possible as you approach a liquidity event. The second is the business owner preparing themselves personally and their family along the lines of what is my purpose? look like in the next chapter. And then the third is really where we're focused today, and that's preparing their personal financial portfolio for the pending liquidity event. And so that's really what Brandon was talking about today around planning for your estate. And we find that business owners ahead of a sale really neglect this third area of preparation, probably more than any other. And even though we know that founders and entrepreneurs hate paying taxes, sometimes they hate even more than that preparing not to pay taxes. So, or at least they neglect it, right? And so, it's a signal for us at SDR to be a part of the community where, in the investment banking industry, traditionally, everyone is just sort of focused on the highest gross offer and getting the highest possible price. And certainly that's a focus of ours as well. But our view is that the net proceeds are actually just as important, if not more important than the gross. And founders and entrepreneurs are sometimes surprised that advancing these conversations around taxes, wealth management, and estate planning well ahead of a pending transaction or liquidity event is almost always beneficial in the long run in terms of the things that you can do to protect that liquidity after a transaction occurs.
Great. So if this isn't going to occur until December 31st, 2025, why are we talking about this now?
Who would you like to take that, Becky?
Andrew, do you have any sort of comments on this?
Sure. Yes, I can. I think that it's always, with all the changes and uncertainty, coming up with the tax changes, with the election and everything, it just is essential to have a plan. And so it's never too early to start planning. For most business owners, their business is their main asset. But then you also have other personal assets and personal goals that you want to plan for as well. And so it's critical to try and tie all that together. So you not only look at how your business is running now and what you could do to improve that, but also what the exit strategy is. And as Scott alluded to earlier, how do you handle the proceeds? What does that mean for your retirement and your lifestyle after you exit the business? And then also, what does it mean for transferring assets to the next generation? And what is the plan for that? And so with the planning process, we tie all that together, and you can come up with recommendations for not only the business but your personal assets, how to string everything together, incorporate tax strategies, investment strategies, risk management strategies for you, and making sure that you have a plan, and it can change over time. It's not something that you create and then it's set in stone and you have to follow it going forward no matter what. It's a sort of a living, breathing document that can be adaptable over time to your changing goals, your changing needs for both your business and your family.
Great. Thanks, Andrew.
Becky, if I could follow up on that real quick. I
Yeah,
think another reason why we're trying to talk about this stuff now is a couple things. One is it takes time to do this type of planning. There's to take advantage of the estate tax exemption as it is now at a higher number. If we complete this planning to try to mitigate or completely eliminate estate taxation after we pass away, that needs to be done and completed before December 31st, 2025. That's not something that could be started in December of 2025. This is a multi-month, potentially even 6-month plus process, because we have to be coordinating all of these different professionals, whether that's estate planning, estate tax planning, the legal documentation, to the financial professionals, to potentially SDR, and there's the assets, the legal structure. There's a lot that has to be going on. And what also can slow this down is a capacity issue, right? If with so many of these people and business owners out there all trying at the same time to minimize estate tax liability, it's a supply and demand problem. And so if we're able to complete things by the end of 2025, we're able to freeze the estate tax exemption in place, take advantage of the higher numbers. But again, we're talking about it now because it takes time, and there's a little bit of the sooner we get it done, the better, because we're avoiding the supply and demand of professionals and capacity issues that will probably pretty plague all of our industries the last quarter or two of 2025.
Brandon, to that end, haven't you and I discussed, or maybe you've shared with me that you've already talked to tax CPAs that have said, hey, I'm not taking on any new clients, in the second half of 2025?
Yeah, tax CPAs, I've heard it from other, tax attorneys. I've heard maybe not such a clearly defined timeline, but I've heard similar concerns from business valuation experts. A lot of people are really concerned about the entire second half of 2025. Some of them have said we're not taking on new clients the last 6 months. Some have said the last 3 months. But it's definitely that idea of the longer we wait, the longer it will take to complete it, and we might not be able to meet these legal deadlines because people just don't have enough time in the day to get everything done.
Great. Kind of dovetailing off of that, what are some steps that business owners can take today in order to prepare for this change? How can they work with each of you? Beck, let's go ahead and start off with you.
Yeah, I mean, for my background, where I'd start, planning is key. You're able to answer some what ifs, create a baseline, and then say, okay, well, let's see what option A is, B, C, because as business owners, you would maybe want to see what a sale would do, or if you pass the business down, or if you start to sell to employees. If you can have the numbers really jump in there and you can see something that's truly definitive, you're going to be better off. It's you have kind of a light in a dark room. So really beyond that, obviously reviewing your business structure, educating your family members is really important, just to have everybody on the same page. Sometimes the preference is to say, hey, I'm keeping my cards close, but we can give reasons and rationale on why you should be able to include key people more or less. Beyond that, the business succession planning, that's going to be critical too. Again, everything kind of does revert back to having a plan, and oftentimes we see people just kind of hand napkin. We really want to get something that's structured and makes sense, that's a living, breathing document, and you do have to start that in a proactive manner rather than a reactive one.
Thanks, Beck. How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I really like what Beck talked about. We really do need to understand what are we dealing with, if you will. Kind of the bottom of this slide kind of tries to intimate, there's multiple different groups of people who need to worry about and might be impacted by this change in the estate tax exemption. Beck and Andrew are going to do great at helping you understand where you stand with everything. And then for me, it's just reviewing your estate plan. The basic, if you don't have an estate plan, getting one as soon as possible will be really, really helpful. If you do have one, getting the basic foundational documents updated, probably here in 2024, makes a lot of sense. The stuff that's not going to be too much impacted by estate tax considerations, it's just a good opportunity to get everything involved or up to date. And then if you do have any steps that you want to take for estate tax planning, sitting down and meeting with an attorney and understanding what your options are, whether that's changing the business structure a little bit, understanding what your goals are for different types of trust-based planning. Are you philanthropically minded or not? That will determine the different types of estate tax trust planning decisions and steps that you take. Is it lifetime gifting? Is there some transfer of ownership of your business that you would like to do now while you're alive to key persons or children or whatever? That's going to have an impact on what you're trying to do as well. So really two steps. For non-estate tax planning, I would honestly say get that done as soon as possible. And the number two is start having those conversations about the estate tax planning if you have any, and really get a good feel for what your goals are and start narrowing down your options of estate tax planning strategies that you can work on throughout the course of 2025 and have that ready for when the exemption goes down and sunsets.
Great, thanks, Brandon. And then Scott, any closing comments on your end?
No, I think Brandon hit it right. There's actually a multitude of solutions, right, to protect those assets, but they do have to be in place, before a potential sunset happens. And so, one of the really initial steps is getting a business valuation. If a significant portion of your net worth is tied up in your business, we know that tends to be 70, 80%, 90% for a lot of business owners, where that's really the biggest asset you're trying to protect. And there's a bunch of different options, right? But first you have to establish, a defined valuation for the company. And, that sounds simple enough. And in some ways it is, right? But at the same time, business valuation can be done for a number of different reasons. Sometimes you're trying to get it as high as possible, right? And sometimes that's not really the intent, and so valuation is more art than science, and you have to know why you're getting the valuation and what the intention of that is.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. So now we'll go ahead and open it up to the group for any sort of questions that you guys have after the comments from Scott, Andrew, Beck, and Brandon. We have a couple that have been submitted already, but if anyone else has any sort of questions, please go ahead and pop those into the chat feature. We'll go ahead and start off with this first one. How long does this process take? I think it kind of depends on each of your respective fields. So let's go ahead and Brandon, if you can add some comments to that.
Yeah, I mean, from the purely legal side, I would say general rule of thumb about 3 months from beginning to end. Sometimes 2, sometimes 4, but I would say 3 is a pretty decent timeline. Again, purely from the legal perspective, not talking about the business and getting the valuations and having the trust in the business coordinating and properly funded the right way. That would be some extra time, but purely legal, about 3 months as a general rule.
Perfect. Beck and Andrew.
Sure, I can take this one, Andrew.
Go ahead.
As far as the general time frame, it's really as quick as we can get information, and therefore conversation. There's a number step process, but as far as from start to finish, where we could say, oh well, if you want to have a planning conversation that then goes into actually creating a managed portfolio, we could make that happen quicker if absolutely necessary. But of course, we want to make sure that we are looking the nook and cranny there. As far as that process, I would say about 30 to 45 days from start to finish.
Perfect. And Scott?
Yes, speaking purely on the valuation aspect, I would say 4 to 6 weeks is a good lead time on that, because you have to get your documents together, your financials, and then other pieces of data for that review as well.
Great, thank you. Next question, what does the cost look like associated to this kind of preparation work? Brandon, if you want to go ahead and kick us off.
Yeah, I mean that's a doozy. I mean, it could be, I'm going to go full attorney on this answer and it's going to say it depends. It depends on how many businesses you own. It depends on what that total net worth looks like and everything. Basic estate planning documents, somewhere around that $5,000 range. If you're talking about, irrevocable trust planning, full-fledged estate tax planning, you know, uh, there's going to be a little bit of like the bell curve, right? I think most people are probably going to be seeing the additional planning somewhere being in that $10,000 to $20,000 range. But again, depending on how many businesses you own, total net worth, and how consolidated you are with all those other assets and things like that, it can be even higher for something like that. So,
Scott, what about for a business valuation?
Yeah, I like Brandon with the it depends, but I'd say it really depends on the size, complexity of the business asset. Is there real estate involved? Multiple entities, all that sort of thing. But if it's relatively simple business structure, I'd say directionally $10,000 to $20,000.
And Andrew, any comments on your end?
Yeah, the financial planning process that we do is sort of an initial process to start the relationship and really build on it. So we don't generally charge for the financial planning part of it. It's part of our package of services that we offer. So if there's investment management involved, we have a fee schedule for that. And if there's any banking, loans or deposit transactions, there's fees for that or schedules for that. Any insurance would be handled separately that is needed. So it's really the plan is to set up the whole process, build a relationship. We get to know you through that process, and then get to move forward. However, we all decide how best to move forward with that and what services would be best utilized by you, the end user.
Perfect. We had another question come in. How do state tax laws come into play, specifically New York? Brandon, maybe you can add some color to this.
Yeah, so there's definitely two things. One is state tax laws are definitely part of this potentially. The estate tax that we've been kind of talking about all day today is federal estate tax, so that applies in all 50 states. Now, there are some states that have state estate taxes. Some of them are connected to the federal estate tax. That's most states. So we don't really have to worry about those. But some states also have state estate taxes like New York. And so that's a whole completely different animal that is the same general idea of, hey, your net worth up to this exemption amount is going to be estate tax free, but above that, there's going to be some issues there. Like for New York, I have some basic notes on that, but theirs is generally there's an estate tax of somewhere between 3% and 16%. I don't know if that's a tax bracket. I'd have to dive a little bit more into that detail. For states above 5.9 million, so quite a bit lower than what we're talking about on the federal level. So importance of working with an attorney for that, whether that's a local attorney or in New York, or working with an attorney who has local counsel that they can co-counsel with in the state that you're located. Either one of those is just fine, but definitely want to have a conversation with an attorney for state tax law considerations.
Great, thanks, Brandon. How might the action impact the probability of any changes in law prior to the sunset? Brandon, maybe you can also go ahead and take this one.
Yeah, it's all legal stuff, right? And if it's legal, it's politics. So it's going to be it's probably going to make a really big deal. It's going to depend on, it's trying not to get too political here, but there's one political party that would like to see the estate tax exemption go down. Another political party would like to see the estate tax exemption stay where it is or go up. And so between that plus the general perception or reality of dysfunction in DC and the inability to get a whole lot done, I think what you're really seeing is if you kind of have a blue wave of Democrats are in full control in all the different levers of government, or it's going to be more likely to see things go in one direction. If we see a red wave of Republicans coming into government, it's going to be pretty clear that it'll be heading in the opposite direction. If it's mixed, it's going to be a little bit more fun, or uncertain of what in the world is going to happen. So there's a lot of people who want to wait and see for the election. It's important to kind of know that politics is important. But I mean, there's only 4.5 months until the election actually happens. And so there is a little bit of a wait and see, but we do need to know that it's going to have an impact on what ends up happening with the exemption.
Great, thank you. And then the last
Brandon,
question. Oh, sorry, Scott.
Sorry, is it fair to say, I'm just interpreting, but if there is, unless there is, as you said, a red wave across different branches of government, the probability is probably greater than 50% that the sunset does in fact happen. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think most attorneys that I know that are kind of on the speaking circuit, if you will, that the comfortably above 50% of people expect the exemption to go down. There are some people who argue to the opposite, and they do have some pretty compelling arguments. It's kind of based off of personal expediency and need on the politician's part rather than pure party politics or anything like that. So we only have so many minutes to dive into that. But yeah, I think most people are expecting the exemption to go down. So, and that's probably the easiest condition to say, hey, only with the red wave would it, and Republicans taking over everything, would there be any real expectations for it to stay where it is or go away or anything.
Great. Then the last question we have is, which other, if any, professionals should I get in touch with? Maybe we can just go ahead and go around the horn and add any sort of comments. Brandon, if you want to kick us off.
I mean, we've kind of got the group here in a lot of ways. It's an accountant might be the only other addition, right? But really, it's legal, financial planning, business valuation, and an accountant are potentially, well, yeah, accountant, maybe life insurance could be a solution for something like this as well, but that's kind of depend on certain conditions. But I would say the group here plus an accountant is a really good core group.
Awesome.
We'll have to bring along a CPA next time.
Yeah. They're too busy on vacation recovering. So.
Well, it looks like those were all of our questions submitted. Before everyone kind of logs off, please go ahead and scan those QR codes to schedule any sort of follow-up meetings with Beck, Scott, Brandon, and Andrew. Everyone is available to go ahead and chat with you. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in today, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Becky?